Hello, my name is Kiro, and this is Oiru. In this video, I will be talking about the basic grammatical voices of active, passive, and antipassive. I will also talk about English's voices and how they're different from the basic ones. As a quick note, if there's anything wrong in this video, please let me know. I'll pin a comment to correct myself if necessary. Before we learn about voices, we need to learn about some basic jargon. Verbs are words that convey actions. These verbs can have many arguments, which are mandatory things that complete the meaning of the action. Today I will focus on 3 arguments. There is A for agent, O for object, and S for soul. Look at this sentence. He hates him. The word he in this case is the agent, while the word him is the object. Because this action has 2 arguments, it's considered a transitive verb. An agent is the subject of a transitive verb, while an object is the other argument for a transitive verb. Compare this with the sentence, he walks. The only argument here is the soul, he. This action only has 1 argument, so it is called an intransitive verb. In short, transitive verbs have an agent and an object, while intransitive verbs have a soul. A voice is the relationship between a verb and its arguments. I will explain each basic voice with examples from my conlang called Taekso, as well as some English analogies to really get the point across. Firstly, Taekso has an active voice. The active voice is the default way to express transitive verbs. It's also the only voice used for verbs that are strictly intransitive. For transitive verbs, the word order is agent-verb-object, AVO. For intransitive verbs, the word order is soul-verb, SV. Taekso's active voice is marked with a prefix, de. This active verb has 2 arguments. Since the active voice is agent-verb-object, it tells you that Kiro is the agent and Oiru is the object. To make an analogy in English, I will indicate the active voice with the suffix act, like this. For intransitive verbs, see this example. This active verb only has 1 argument, which tells you it must be the soul. Therefore, Kiro is the sole argument that undergoes the action of growing. With the suffix analogy, it can look like this. Like I said before, the active voice is the default voice. If we want to spice things up, we can use other voices. Speaking of which, Taekso has a passive voice. The passive voice emphasizes the object of a transitive verb and makes the agent optional. You can also think of the passive as de-emphasizing the agent. When the verb is transitive, the word order is object-verb-agent, OVA. When you omit the agent, the object becomes a soul, so you get SV, soul verb. Taekso indicates the passive voice with the prefix ge. Since this passive verb has 2 arguments, and the word order is object-verb-agent, it tells you that Oiru is the object and Kiro is the agent. In English, the passive voice looks like this. In both of these sentences, you can remove the agents, and the sentences will still make sense. Once you remove the agents, the verb becomes intransitive, and the object becomes a soul. Taekso's word order then becomes soul verb, SV. In summary, this is what the passive voice is. Keep in mind that an originally transitive verb in the passive voice can become intransitive. However, an originally intransitive verb cannot become passive, because there is no object to emphasize. Thirdly, Taekso has an antipassive voice. English doesn't have an antipassive, but it's not too hard to understand. The antipassive emphasizes the agents and makes the object optional. You can also think of the antipassive as de-emphasizing the object. The word order is agent-verb-object, AVO, but the object can be omitted. Taekso indicates passive voice with the prefix b. Since this antipassive verb has 2 arguments, and the word order is agent-verb-object, it tells you that Kiro is the agent and Oiru is the object. To make an analogy in English, I will indicate the antipassive voice with the suffix ap. In both cases, you can remove the objects. After removing the objects, the remaining agent becomes a soul, and you get soul verb, SV, as the word order. In summary, this is what the antipassive voice is. Note that an originally transitive verb in the antipassive voice can become intransitive. However, an originally intransitive verb cannot become antipassive, because there is no agent to emphasize. Now hold on a second, you might say. I still don't know how the antipassive is different from the active voice. Let's compare them side by side. Remember, for transitive verbs, the active voice is default and doesn't emphasize any arguments. Both arguments participate in the action, but are of equal status. For the antipassive, the agent is emphasized, just like how in the passive voice, the object is emphasized. The emphasis also determines how each voice behaves when there's only one argument. The active voice has a soul, which is the only argument for a strictly intransitive verb. The passive voice has a soul that comes from the object after the agent is omitted. And the antipassive has a soul which comes from the agent after the object is omitted. Therefore, the differences between the voices is emphasis of the arguments. Some of you might still ask, what about the word order? Well, different voices can have different word orders, but they don't have to. You know how I gave English analogies for the active voice and the antipassive voice? I can also give one to the passive with the suffix pass. With 3 analogies, this makes every single English voice have the same word order, and yet they're still emphasizing different arguments. In summary, the active voice is agent-verb-object, or soul-verb. The passive voice is object-verb-agent, or soul-verb. And the antipassive voice is agent-verb-object, or soul-verb. You might have noticed something glaring throughout this video. English doesn't work like this. What gives? Let's go back to this table. Remember the 2 analogies we had? I put them there because English didn't have an antipassive. Let's remove them and see what happens. For verbs with 2 arguments, the active and the antipassive become exactly the same, which means English's active voice always emphasizes the agent, just like our basic antipassive. So, why don't we just call it the antipassive? Well, look what happens for verbs with 1 argument. English's active voice can be used for intransitive verbs, just like our basic active voice. English's active voice also has the function of our basic antipassive, which means the argument can be the soul or the agent, depending on if the verb is intransitive or transitive originally. This is also why many English verbs can be transitive and intransitive interchangeably, completely depending on context. By analyzing English voices as a combination of basic voices, suddenly English's labeling isn't too weird. But this different set of labels is often why people struggle with understanding the point of the antipassive. English does have antipassive expressions. It's just that the basic antipassive is hidden in English's active voice. Just to really bring it home, here's a table of English's voices. And here's the table of our voices, which makes room for the antipassive.